Okay, hi everyone. It's been a while. I apologize. I recorded I recorded this D&D session for this session that I'm going to read, but it was recording my microphone from my VR headset, not the microphone that I have on my desk, which I use when I'm playing D&D with my friends. Unfortunately, that means that everything that I said during the D&D campaign was not heard. So I couldn't do what I wanted to do with the recorded sessions, which was record everything, have all of the information for all of you to read, and then actually use that. Well, not actually use the quotes. My friends wouldn't let me do that, but I'd be able to actually say exactly what was said in the game by reviewing the video. Well, unfortunately, that isn't going to work. Nothing Helmer said, nothing I said, is recorded because I fucked up. I didn't record from my microphone for the entire 6-hour recording period. So, a bunch of everything that I said is missing, which means that all the times that I jumped in to be Dungeon Master, I'm trying to remember everything off of memory. It has been 2 weeks since that session. There is another session. I recorded that session. I promise that session will be coming out as soon as I can record it and as soon as I can write a script for it. That one should be able to go a lot faster because I did actually record that one with my voice. So, without further ado, let's jump in. The Gerneria Chronicle, Episode 2, The King's Festival. Also, you can see that my left hand's going to move because I actually fixed the teleprompter. It's been 3 months since the events of the last session. It's the wet season, the weird jungle, temperate locations that we find ourselves in, and the King's Festival is right around the corner. Recapping the players for you all, we have Elle, the bloodthirsty savage elf, Cyril, the chill necromancer, Gabriel the paladin, and our current GM, and Helmer, the dwarven blacksmith / war skald. Gwen T is not around this week. They had to take a hiatus. That's another reason why this video took so long for me to make. I'm going to be honest here, guys. The first hour of this session didn't even involve playing the game. Instead, there was a long discussion about what demi-bisexual means, and I was mostly just looking for art for my dwarf after his new sort of storm god king guy change situation. I also didn't even contribute to the conversation. I was so absorbed in my seeking. Eventually, I gave up, just started screwing around with Night Cafe, which is my AI art generator of choice. And for like the whole hour, I was just fucking around with working on my portrait. There are also more Night Cafe shenanigans later on as well. Beyond that, I also have to mention that my microphone wasn't... Oh shit, I didn't realize I read this in the script. My microphone wasn't coming through on the recording of the majority of this session, which is why the script took so long to write, and why I rarely mention what Helmer says, because some of it I can't remember. While discussions were had, eventually we got to the point where in-character conversations started, and this is when everything starts to kick off. It opens up with Elle arriving at the manor of our paladin benefactor, which is a derelict manor. She sees Cyril slumped over the table, sleeping. Elle spooks him awake with a random hug and a "What's up, buddy? Want some of this meat?" She swung around some nondescript bush meat that she hunted down, and Cyril replied with, "Sure, I'll take some meat, but I don't think you've bathed since the last time I saw you." Elle replied with beaming pride, and without washing her hands, proceeded to carve the meat. Actually, I think in the recording she says she does wash her hands, but you'll find out later that that doesn't really mean much. Gabriel comes down the stairs, exhausted. It's apparently far too early. Elle shoots him a winning smile, her middle teeth glinting in the sunlight. Helmer, despite living down the hill, can smell the meat cooking and starts walking up the hundreds of steps. Gabriel brewed some coffee, and the party sat down for breakfast. Helmer asked how Elle's metal teeth were doing, and Elle replied with her manic grin, and "They're doing great!" Gabriel commented on the fact that despite basically saving the world twice, we don't know each other that well. He also talked about what happened at the castle, and was wondering how you decompress about that. Helmer mentioned some of his religious awakening, and effectively how he hadn't quite actually decompressed at all after all of that, on top of having to forge some metal teeth for a crazed elf who thankfully has lost her madness now. Elle mentioned that Helmer could put that on his resume. "Ah, yeah, of course. Skilled wordsmith who makes magical weapons and also a part-time dentist." If you need someone to back your claims, my mouth is here, Elle replied. Cyril was also asked about how he was doing after all the events of the previous game, and he simply replied, "Non-stop working." To explain, his character was basically forced into a higher rank after he almost single-handedly protected the world from potential destruction and brought a cadre of false apostles to the cult's doorstep to be executed for their crimes, along with the BBEG himself. As a result, for the whole 3-month period, he had to spend his XP rolls on exclusively cult-based skills. This resulted in his character being rightfully exhausted when he got back. Also, I forgot to mention it last time, but there were some goblins that were brought into our home during prior games. Some I was there for, some I wasn't there for. There's no diaries for those. We met with some goblins we effectively massacred and then proceeded to bring the remnant into our fold. Another game later, and the goblins were protected by Fey spirits for a year and a day. In short, these are the most civilized, well-educated goblins in the land, all thanks to Cyril. Anyway, more in-character banter was had. There was much bonding and friendship. The Canadians casually dissed Thanksgiving Day here in the US, and then the King's Coronation Festival was confirmed to be tomorrow. We discussed what we would be doing during the festival, and Helmer bonded with Elle by explaining civilized life. Of course, it was the blind leading the blind, as Helmer mostly knows about dwarven culture, not human culture. He talked about things like square dancing, how square dancing in dwarven culture is just, it's literally there are blocks on the ground that look like squares, and you dance around those squares. And then there was also like a sort of squatting dance, which he showed off that was a dwarven dance. It was more mountain dwarf rather than hill dwarf. He was a hill dwarf. Just in general, there was a lot of shenanigans with Helmer. Gabriel was trying to sell it with the games, the music, and the deep-fried food that's supposed to happen there. When Gabriel asked what clothes you were expected to wear, Helmer described Sunday best. Elle had to ask what exactly Sunday clothes even are, and they had to explain what the point of nice clothes were. So we decided to buy her a set of nice clothes until Helmer had the time to make some armored attire which would fit as Sunday best. The party also suggested that Elle take a bath, which deeply offended her. Gabriel got excited and proceeded to bring down his collection of soaps because, of course, he has a collection of soaps. Helmer got to work on helping Elle get washed up, providing her with a wash tub and hot water. She learned the sorrows of brushing her teeth in medieval times, which involved scrubbing daily with charcoal, which was effectively kind of acidic, and would rust her metal teeth, so she also had to put sword oil on the metal teeth, which was gross. Gabriel tried tossing us some soap, ended up hitting himself in the eye with the bar by bouncing it off of a tree. After many more soap shenanigans, we eventually managed to get to work on getting Elle all set up and looking nice and pretty, at least washed for the most part. Washed, shampooed. Generally, she looks like a savage wood elf, and now she's going to look like a clean, if savage, wood elf. Meanwhile, Cyril and Gabriel get ready to head into town for some fine women's clothing for Elle. I got started on prepping some AI art for her by modifying her character art. I managed to get something that looked like someone who had no desire to be where she was. If I can figure out how to put an image on the screen in Adobe, I'll throw it up now somewhere. I also provided her with a sheath made to store 3 daggers under her skirt, as she didn't like the idea of going to a festival unprotected. Helmer could have his battle axe, though. That was just cultural, and the 2 men also had swords. With the men carrying a sword each, we were pretty well protected, despite the lack of combat equipment. To keep the DM from having to RP with himself, I took the position of a few NPCs. Problem, of course, was that my mic wasn't recording at the time, so I will try to provide some description of what conversations he had with the stable master. "Hello, I am in need of a wagon and horses," Gabriel said. "Oh yeah, you need it for the festival, I takes it?" "Yes, it is for the festival." "Ah, well, we've got a problem there, Gov. See, our wagons got rented out before the festival started, and now all we got to spare is the loaner." "The loaner?" "Yeah, it's what we provide people with whenever we need to do repairs on their old wagon. It's not very pretty, just an old hay wagon, really." "Do you have any horses? I assume it needs 2 to pull." "Yeah, but you won't like him." "I'm sure he will be fine." "Steve, get Beard out here, and the loaner with him." Some background. Beard the Horse is a returning character from my D&D campaigns. He is a horse that has some nightmare blood in him. His father was a nightmare, while his mother was a racing champion. You know those pictures of horses that have been pumped so full of steroids and growth hormone that their muscles look more defined than Arnold Schwarzenegger's chest? That's Beard, in a nutshell. His huffs steam from his nose constantly, and his eyes are as red as blood. His name comes from the long, goat-like beard that grows from his chin, and he is capable of moving at upwards of 60 miles an hour without breaking a sweat. Under load! This speed is actually unheard of in medieval times, mind you. A horse that fast would be a prized stud. The only problem is that Beard has killed almost every mare he has studded for. He is extremely temperamental and is carnivorous to boot. He demands a pound of raw steak or pork every day, or he will refuse to pull even a tiny weight. And if he goes hungry too long, well, you can take a wild guess as to what happens when a horse with the blood of a nightmare, a literal demon horse, gets pissed. Gabriel's player looked on in horror as he recalled the name of this terror, but his character had no clue about Beard, so he said, "Sounds good." After negotiating the price, a deal was finally struck. Meanwhile, Cyril was undertaking the rather uneventful task of requesting the assistance of the village tailor, who agreed, but explained that it was going to be quite expensive. The tailor acquired, they headed off at incredible speeds into the direction of home. Gabriel's personal steed huffing and puffing to keep up with Beard's pace, the axle of the wagon sparking and steaming as it traveled at unheard of speeds to the manor. They were just about to go to Plaid when they finally stopped. Elle was bathed several times, as every time her body touched the water turned almost black with dirt, and then she was clothed in a beautiful green dress which hid the sheath around her thigh quite well. She felt awkward and unprotected in it, but she wore it anyway. Finally, the day was over. We got to bed to ready ourselves for the festival proper the next day. We arrived in town with nary a hitch, and at insane speed. The smell of food was in the air, the stands, resplendent in color, sat as beautiful markers of merriment and frivolity. Helmer recognized a pair of bandits, who met Helmer in their first campaign. The bandits were apparently selling salad now. Helmer assumed that they were stealing these plants from nearby farms, but didn't have the ability to determine what exactly was wrong with them. The salads themselves were apparently of incredible quality. Helmer had a spell which acted like a diet version of that appraisal skill from every isekai, which would tell him that these things were incredibly valuable. Way more expensive than they should be. Like, they're only being sold for 4 silver when they should be sold for 10. He took a free salad. 4 silver pieces later, highway robbery for a bowl of leaves, and Helmer had a second bowl to give to his friend. He decided to give this one to Elle. This later turned out to be a bad idea, terrible idea. The two bandits apparently drugged the salad. The idea, I assume, is that people would get a taste for the secret ingredient, I wish I could do air quotes, but I can't, and would go back to the bandits for the real deal. Elle and Helmer spent the rest of the day laughing like maniacs, at least until a later reward from one of the stall games cured us of the drugging. Both me and the GM each made a festival game. 3 festival games each. The first one was a game of darts. When Elle managed to hit enough targets, she got the reward of a nice stuffed pig plush toy. Don't ask how plush is a thing in this era. Elle also burned a luck point on this game, a mistake we will soon regret as we burn the rest of our luck on these games. Elle gave the plush piggy to some random child on the street. I need to express that Elle is a giant lady. She is almost 8 feet tall, so this kid is slightly intimidated, to say the least. Hello, giant lady! The next stall was a big stage set up with a strong man. The ringleader called out, "Come one, come all! See if you can challenge the mighty Ivan and succeed." A man stepped up to the stage, and they began the challenge. The first challenge was to consume a whole sponge cake faster than Ivan could. Then you had to rip a piece of leather into 3 consecutive pieces with your bare hands. Finally, you had to break an anvil in half with a single strike. The challenger lost at the anvil. He was unable to break it in half, while Ivan managed to do it without a hitch. Everyone made perception checks. Helmer, whose job it was to hammer away at an anvil, rolled blacksmithing. "There's a flaw in the anvil. It's been pre-cracked. It's pretty small. You could probably just roll your forearm to open the crack a little." Ivan points out the incredibly tall woman in the crowd and starts taunting her. "Ivan will crush puny woman into dust. Puny woman stand no chance against Ivan the Strong." The ringleader started to bring the crowd into a frenzy as he showed off the reward. "Remember, folks, the reward for beating our strong man is this beautiful red dragon scale cloak, which was 6 armor points worth of protection, but only for the back." Elle was contemplating just killing the man, but Cyril explained that this was part of the game. She had to go up there. Use the knowledge Helmer gave you to beat him, Gabriel cheered on. Come on, little girl, you chicken, Ivan continued to jeer. Elle finally accepted as both the party and the crowd began to cheer. Elle, 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 Elle! Another luck point burned for pointless reasons. Another man stepped up before she could make up her mind. The man fell at the first hurdle. The cakes are as hard as stone, and Ivan has fresh, softer cakes. Elle was pushed to the stage, cheered on by the entire way by the crowd. She tried to chew down the cakes, but unfortunately she failed as the solid, unleavened cake was so poorly crunched through. However, it wasn't it. The next step was to tear leather with their bare hands. She successfully managed to tear the leather into 3 consecutive pieces. Eventually, it got to the point where Elle was about to hit the anvil, and she rolled a stealth roll to get to one of the rigged anvils first, meaning that Ivan had the unrigged anvil. Ivan let out a roar. "Ah!" Slammed his arm into the anvil, and there was an awful crunching of bone as the bones in his forearm shattered against the solid metal. He started screaming in pain and was carried away to be tended. "Well, miss, congratulations, you won the cloak. Here you are, fair and square." He handed the cloak over, and show was over. She took the cloak, the red dragon hide, perfectly complementing her emerald dress, and we moved on for the next game. The next game is going to involve me talking about a whole lot of cock. Now, when I say cock, I don't mean cock or cock. I mean cock as in cock. Got it? Good. After the anvil, Elle and Helmer both had to make endurance checks, which we both failed. The drugged salads finally kicked in, and the chuckling began. The next game Cyril was pushed into was chicken chasing. "Are any of you souls brave enough to become king of the cock?" cried the stall runner. Elle and Helmer both started wheezing. He said, "Cock!" "Gather the colored hens into their respective pens and win yourself a prize." You'd make a great cock herder. More laughing from Elle and Helmer. This you would become a great cock herder was from, of course, Gabriel, and it was directed at Cyril. More laughing was had from Elle and Helmer, and so Cyril began to step up. Time to become the cock king, I guess. It is at this point where I stepped away for some coffee and a sandwich, so I only know this part from listening back to it. Athletics was rolled, and surprisingly, the chickens failed miserably. Maybe I am king of cock. He starts trying to screech at the cocks, intimidating them, leading the various cocks into their respective holes. "My God, it's the cock whisperer," cried the stall owner. "You, sir, are the king of the cock for today." He places a hat upon Cyril's head, a bright red hat that looks like a rooster's comb, and into his hands a beautiful, superior quality cock. We're still talking about chickens here, guys. Serious business. Stop laughing. It is at this point I got back with my sandwich and my coffee, and I got back to getting the next game set up. "Here you all, come here. Old Granny has a little something for you all. My great-great-great-grandma's recipe for perfect pasty. I only make 'em once a year from the finest and mildly magical ingredients. 10 silver apiece, but if any of you can guess how many beans are in this jar, you can have the whole plate." Elle, who was the party's sugar mama, just bought a bunch of them. The party started thinking. A few failed attempts were made, so Cyril tried mentioning something. "It's not even full of beans, is it? The beans are all stuck to the sides." In that moment, he saw a twitch in her face, a micro-expression of fear. They were able to count the beans on the sides of the jar once they figured that out, and won the whole plate worth. The perfect pasty cleansed any non-magical poisons and would sate the consumer for a full day. They were also very well preserved, as long as they weren't bitten into. The party had enough for quite a few days' worth of travel, and Helmer carried most of the pasties on him. Next game, drinking contest, a challenge by one of Gabriel's rivals. As a noble, I will call upon one of the people living upon my lands to take this challenge in my name. Helmer, care to take the challenge? Drinking contest. Now you're talking like a dwarf. And the rival quickly regrets their decision. First shot of the town's finest, dang near spiritus, and she was fine. Helmer downed his like it was nothing, and the game was on. She continued to match one another, shot for shot, until Helmer got 2 critical successes to resist the booze. At that point, 6 shots in, and the rival tipped over, completely unconscious. Helmer, being an honorable sort, provided the woman with a room and a bucket from the bar before he stumbled off in the direction of the final challenge. A dance-off. Square dance music was played. Helmer stepped up on the stage, sobered by the idea that he might be able to sing, and began doing the square dance callouts, swing your partner round and round and such. In the center of the dance floor was a legend of my games, Dr. Thunderthighs, MD. Dr. Thunderthighs is a master of his craft and a skilled swindler. He is fully capable of healing anyone from the brink of death, but he usually ends up taking his payment in the form of knocking his patient unconscious and then proceeding to steal everything they have on them. His thighs were also the thickest in the land, and he was very good at dancing. The dance-off was a long process, broken up like combat. Gabriel described each of his dance moves by sending GIFs into the chat from various anime and video games. Slowly, each player failed against the might of the good doctor, but one man refused to give up. Still stood there, with a comb on his head and his cock in his hands, Cyril busted a move so great that even the almighty Thunderclap, Thunderthighs' signature move, could not defeat such smooth moves. Cyril was given a necklace which would cast Thunderclap at a very high intensity, which for reference was that spell the weather mages were trying to use to knock us prone. Last session, cue the link in the corner. Before anyone could celebrate, however, disaster struck when a storm giant appeared seemingly from nowhere, beaten and bruised, bleeding out and mad with pain. Initiative was rolled. Elle started throwing her knives, Cyril shrunk the giant into a more manageable size, and then cursed it to be effectively unable to fight back. Helmer threw bolts of lightning, crying, "Child of the storm, stand down!" He wept when the giant died. He may not have known if the creature was something that followed the storm as he did, or if it was merely a creature born of it. Regardless, the death made Helmer feel great sorrow. While everyone else began feasting and celebrating the death of the giant, Helmer decided to start walking home. Elle decided to follow behind by sneaking up on Helmer. She sort of, stuck to the bushes and such. Suddenly, the both of them were blinded by sorcery. Mages hiding in the bushes. The elf could see the pulse of the living in the shrubbery, so she tried to put up a fight, but ultimately, she was fighting at a disadvantage. Helmer reached within, seeking to draw upon that moment when he felt the power of a god and opened his eyes to the pulse of magic. With that, he could see somewhat, but mostly just shapes and blobs, and only those that were affected by magic, but he could see regardless, also at a disadvantage. They ultimately stood no chance. The people beat both Elle and Helmer to within an inch of their lives, and before they left, one of them said, "Red Bear sends his regards. Keep your nose out of his business." Red Bear. A name from a session that I unfortunately wasn't present for, but a bad guy regardless. The rest of the party found our bodies beaten and broken hours later. They returned us to base and started working to patch us up, but that was where that session ended. That's it for the session that week. This was actually the session for 2 weeks ago, obviously, but it took me a while to write the script because, again, I've said it multiple times in the video, my mic was not being recorded for most of it. Good lord. That was so bad. Next session will be the result of us tending our wounds, and we'll return to the keep where the storm ritual happened to find out why that storm giant headed this way in the first place. Well, I suppose I better get going. Time for me to get to it. Yup. Best all you bundle up, cause fall is here and them leaves are just a changing and Jack Frost is right around the corner, Probably gonna make me some apple cider one of these days, alright, bye-bye, yup, goodbye, yup, bye.